Okay, step 2, the wheel. It's a pretty big 3-inch wheel here. I've got a smaller one. I like to do some of these smaller areas here with, so I'll probably do that off camera. I've got my other English wheel set up with a small wheel for doing just this kind of stuff, so I like to leave it that way. Let's just tap this thing right away. Get in here. Or not. Let's start from the front. I'll deal with it later. I always used to think this is the best way to wheel, but this is actually the worst way to wheel. I do, however, I'll give it a few strokes here, and that'll tell me where the weld is thicker on here, where the actual seam weld is thicker and thinner. It'll give me a little indication. I'll know how to work that spot. So we're just going to start out that way. And we want to start out loose, fairly loose. Let the tank kind of wobble and find its own. You want it just so this top wheel doesn't skid on it. But this is a very light, low pressure. Want to make sure the wheel doesn't go off and make a crease in here too. So we want to stay fairly toward the center of this. It feels pretty even. There are some wobbles in it. Okay, feels good. Little kinks on there. There's a kink right there, but those all come out when you go sideways, crossways with it. We go perpendicular to the length of the tank on here. And that wheel is crowned just about perfect here. Get into there, so I'm going to go ahead and continue this as long as we're not damaging the corners or edges on it. That's about as much as we want to do right there. The rest of this we can treat with the other wheel, and we can get crossways with the other wheel on this side here. So we're going to begin by just spinning it. I like to work it from the middle to one end and then work it back again. We're going to do that, and we just want to go real easy on it, real slow, little at a time. Aluminum likes a little at a time. Can never bash aluminum in one direction and finish it off and then move over and finish the next spot. You got to keep aluminum moving. I'm feeling those kinks, and I'm able to pull down on the tank where I feel a low spot and kind of help it along. You're still hand shaping this. The wheel's really doing nothing. It's kind of bridging some of the gaps in there is all it's doing. You're using that bottom wheel. You don't want that top wheel to be squeezing on that aluminum right now. You're just kind of going along. You're feeling the bumps and dents in the aluminum. You're working those out slowly by hand. One thing about the wheel is I used to think, oh yeah, you just go back and forth across it with the wheel and it's going to take dents out. Well, yeah, to a certain extent, but that's not the real efficient way to use a wheel. And wheels can be used to shape the metal or to planish the metal. We're using the wheel to planish the metal. We don't want it to raise the crown in the middle of this tank right now. That's the last thing we need. So if I wanted to raise the crown in the middle of this tank, I'd crank down on the wheel a little bit more, but this is just to even out all the whoopties in it right now. You can control that. If you feel you got whoopties on this side, you don't have enough leverage to pull that down, you can turn the tank around and do it the other way. As a matter of fact, that's kind of what I do anyway, is I'll work it from both sides. Okay, and this gets a little tricky because you can see where the compound curve right here starts to dive into here, so you have to kind of aim your wheel a little bit to the end of that if you want to properly get in all the way across that top crown and make this all work. You have to run the tank into that direction. Okay, and we're just going to leave that wheel set, not any tighter than what it is. We just keep going over it. It's just taking those little deflections out of there. And you're not damaging the tank. You're not putting any crown on it. One thing I like to go by is the sound. I always say aluminum talks to you. You can hear when it got that sound when you're running it through the wheel. You're actually damaging the metal. When I say damaging, I don't mean necessarily in a bad way. If you're trying to put a crown in the metal or shape it, like a lot of the coach builders will take a bigger piece of metal and they'll shape it with a wheel. That's what you're supposed to be doing. So that's not a bad sound. Here it's kind of it tells me that I'm restructuring the metal or reshaping the metal. Stretching, flattening. All we want to do is we just want to keep it the shape that we started out with. So we just keep working it. We get a spot here where it feels like there's a low spot. We just go and we're pulling down on the tank. Oh, it's going across that spot. We just keep doing that. And we want to run it all the way into this corner. I'll tell you why. Even if your wheel isn't drawn down tight, wherever you stop, there'll be a ridge that you'll leave with your wheel. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll alternate. I'll go in a little further on one stroke and a little shallower on the next. So you don't get that pronounced line. But we are going to go over this, and we're actually going to go over the top of that line once we're done smoothing the top. So I'm feeling a low spot here. So I'm kind of, with my hand, I'm kind of pulling down on it. And anybody that has never used an English wheel before, guys that use them make it look easy, because the first thing I had to learn was tracking. How to steer the wheel. It's almost opposite of like steering your car. Okay, I feel a little spot here where I'm going to have to exert, I think, more pressure on the wheel. So we're just going to run it past that, and then when we come back, I'll have a chance to examine that again. That little spot. These are cheats. They want to use it if you want to. Now, defining what you want to do. Have a cheat. Have a number of slides. You will know yourself what you want. Don't keep cameras straight. I'll come back again across the table. No, sometimes around 80, or 70, something, and sometimes around 50. Even if I found it right off, I was like, no more. Now we had to work like this. It doesn't work as well. It stretches well. It doesn't do as much as we can. I have to force it and shape it. But I found over the years, if you coax it enough, it shapes a lot better. Or you work as hard as that ring. I'll probably say more a little bit more. Just tighten it up just a little bit. Just a hair. And the reason I'm doing that is because I can feel that little lumpiness in there. And the only way to get that down, that lumpiness down, is to smooth it down with the wheel. I'm being very careful not to put too much heat on it, or too much torque, I should say. You just go over it and over it and over it again. It's going to finally come into its shape. If you do go over it too much, you can slide down like that and break out the wheel. You do. Obviously, you can add a little slide up. Put it slide out. Take this spot. It's weird. Take this up. Here's the spot. Run over that area. Now, here's something else you want to consider. Wherever the metal is thick, and you have to get it down to the, flatten it down to the metal around it, you're going to cause a bulge there, because that metal's got to go somewhere. It has to go somewhere, and you can put a bulge in there on purpose, and then you can slap it down with a slapper. And a lot of this is from experience. You'll want to get a real good feel in your hand. Some guys will drag their fingers across it and go, "Oh, it's got a low spot right here." Bullshit. You can't feel that with your fingertips like you can feel it if you've got your whole hand on it. It's going to tell you the story between here and here, and you'll feel those undulations in the metal. So get out of the habit of doing this. 3 fingers, 4 fingers, 5, whatever. It takes your hand and you can feel the whole area, and it compares to the larger area around it, so you can get a better feel for that. So okay, I just wanted to show you my selection of dollies over here that I'll be using for this. I may not use all of them. However, I'll probably be using that slapper mostly. And one of the reasons for that is this tank isn't perfect. You can see the dent right there. That was from the planisher. Rather than try to planish that out, it was a little bit unruly. That's how it got in there in that first place. I just choose to do it by hand. It's real easy. Just get behind it and give it a wrap from behind, and then maybe a couple slaps from the front, and that thing's going. So you can see across the top, you see the reflection on how smooth and flat that top has turned out on there. I don't think I'm going to do much with that. I mentioned taking that little bit of extra crown out of there. It's probably unnecessary. Now, speaking of hearing, I mentioned before that aluminum talks to you. You hear the sound of the dolly behind it. When you hear a ringing sound, like you're ringing on the dolly, that means you're damaging the metal. Let me explain that. You're pinching that metal between the dolly and giving it a good solid hit, and you're exerting all that pressure in one tiny spot. What you're trying to do with a dolly is you're trying to get the dolly up and push while you're pounding the edges down around the dolly. And when you hear the dinging, that means stop. Okay? The ringing noise is not the bullseye. I got it. It's the whoops. So we're gonna real quick. I've got this back area to do. I'm just gonna take some of the damage out of this front area. It's also a little high here. I'm gonna try to bring this down just a little bit. Here we go. Okay, you can see what we got here. This corner across here isn't perfect. I couldn't get it in my other machine, and the crown, I could feel it when I was trying to go over the top of it. It was hitting here and here, so the wheel diameter, the bottom anvil, was not small enough to get into there. So we're going to try that with a suitable size dolly. Now I got this corner here looks pretty good here. And this is kind of slapper material because we're trying to shrink this as well as shape it. I'm going to start at the top here. What I'm trying to do is bring the top. There's a little bit of a bump here from the gathered metal. Here's a dent, same thing that happened in the front from where the edge of that Planisher came up against there. So nice. Yeah, that one right here. Yeah, pretty much. Shall I get it? Let's get it over here. There, and that is the perfect shape right there. Perfect contour. Edges are real nice. Now, as I mentioned with the front earlier, this is getting a relief cutout right about here. So this will shape relatively easier than what we're doing right now. Kind of a pick your battles thing. So we're going to pick that battle for later. As for planishing this out, we're all done. This is all finished off. We're going to play around with some of the corners here and the bottom edges of it. We'll probably put this in our seam roller and make this line just a little bit sharper here as we go, and then we'll be ready to work on the bottom. So that's what goes into planishing a two-piece tank. So as always, thanks for stopping by the shop. This is Dave Ashenbrenner. We'll see you next time.